Hey, Brian. All right, so you guys, I'm going to do a live stream here. I don't know if anybody's actually tuning into this. It's cool that Brian's saying hi, so I know something's happening. Um, Brian, can you type in and tell me if you can hear me? Can you guys hear me? All right, well, you're just typing hello, but hopefully that means you can hear me. All right, so I'm just going to go through the first 5 questions here. This is totally a test run, but if we can. Okay, awesome. Thanks, Chance. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and go through the first 5 questions. We'll see if this works well, and hopefully we can start doing this as our review session so that you guys don't have to come in at night or on the weekend. So I'm going to start off with number 1 for the multiple choice. So for what we had here, it was talking about a breakdown of like looking at the most from least complex to most complex within an organism. So first thing I want you guys. Okay, thanks. I'm like checking out what you guys are writing that it's super laggy. That's fine. Okay, so the first thing that I want you guys to realize is that when we're talking about an organism, the organism is a human. Okay, it could be something else, but in our case, we've been looking at the human body, so it's talking about a human. Other than that, the most basic building block, as we've seen, so you guys already know that the most basic building block is a cell. Okay, so if we're looking at a human, and I'm going to use the example of digestive system. Okay, so here then besides system, if we're talking about digestive system, our digestive system, as you guys know, is made up of the digestive tract, which has our mouth, our esophagus, our stomach, our small intestine, large intestine. Okay, so that all of those things together is a system, but the system is made up of organs. So an example of an organ for this would be your stomach. Okay, and inside your stomach is composed of tissues. So your tissue, like a tissue, is basically like a group of cells. So I'll put like stomach lining for this as like group of cells together. And as we know, the building blocks of everything inside your body is the cell. So everything in your body is made up of cells. So the most basic unit would be the cell. So I'm just going to write basic unit. All right, so that means that the smallest thing we have is the cell. After that, you have tissue, okay, because the tissue is composed of cells. An organ is composed of tissue. Then it goes to a system, like your digestive system. And then organism is the whole human. Okay, so they already had it set up as organism being the last one for all of these. But if you check that out, it's going to show you that it should be, okay, so A, E, B, D, and then the last one being C. A, E, B, D, C. So your answer should be A. Okay, are you guys all good for this? Can I move on to number 2? I'm just going to go for it. If anyone has any questions about number 1, please type them in now before I move on to number 2. Okay, perfect. I'm going to go on to number 2. So number 2 was talking to us about mitosis and meiosis. Okay, so for mitosis and meiosis, I know you guys don't remember this very well, but it's talking about cell production. Okay, so we have 2 processes that happen to reproduce cells within our body, but they're slightly different. Okay, so I'm just going to write on the side here and recap the 2. So mitosis versus meiosis. Okay, so in both cases, just going to write down here, both are for making new cells, because we know that our cells die all the time. So sometimes, like anything that you're doing, your cells are dying. Some of them we have to do something to reproduce our cells. Other ones we don't. I'm just saying, like in some systems the cells die and you cannot replace them. In other systems we can replace them. Otherwise we would die, because we need to keep our cells reproducing in order to keep ourselves alive. All right. So there's mitosis and meiosis. In mitosis, you're making a new cell with 46 chromosomes, okay? And you started out with one with 46 chromosomes. So you're making one that is an exact copy, okay? So it's an exact copy of the previous cell, okay? Meiosis is not doing that. It's making a new cell. We call it a haploid cell with only 23 chromosomes. Okay, and why would we make something that only has 23 chromosomes? Why would we want to make a half cell? Okay, so I'm going to just start putting on this side reasons why we would want to make exact copies of ourselves. So the job for that is to have growth. So you start out as a baby as only having one cell for right from the beginning. You're composed of just like one sperm and an ovum, and over time you grow into a human. Okay, and that's because of mitosis, because the cells are making copies of themselves and you're growing into a person. Okay, so there's growth. We already said production of identical cells, which is up here. Okay, so we said it's making an exact copy of the cell. Okay, and we said growth of tissue, so we said growth. And it is also repairing tissue. So if you get injured, you need to be able to replace tissue that you've lost. So you have to do that to be able to do cell repair. Okay. The other thing, though, meiosis, our 23 chromosomes over here, is because you need to make sex cells. And so when we're talking about producing your sex cells, this is your sperm or your ovum. Okay, and you need to make copies that only have 23 chromosomes, so that in theory they could be matched up with 23 chromosomes from another person in order to create a new human. Okay, so these are your reproductive cells, and we call these sex cells gametes. And that's a term that you should have, you're going to have to know for the exam, so it should be on your vocabulary sheet that I gave you guys. So production of gametes is part of meiosis. So that one here, when it's saying which of the following is not a function of mitosis, then that would be D, because D is for making like sex cells, which is production of gametes. That's part of meiosis. Okay, so D is our answer for number 2, because it's not mitosis, it's meiosis. All right, so again, any questions for number 2? I'm going to give you a couple of seconds here if you want to type in any questions for number 2. Katie, that's an awesome mitosis joke. Thank you so much for writing that. Brian, I'm not really sure exactly what the deal is. So Brian's asking for flowers, do they have 46 chromosomes no matter what, because they're asexual, or do they combine their own cells? I don't think that different species of plants or different species of animals necessarily have 46 chromosomes. I think that number is specific to humans, and I think it can be different. I think the DNA of other organisms is not necessarily the same as humans, so I don't have an exact answer for you for flowers, okay? Everyone good to go for meiosis and mitosis in humans? Okay, I'm going to go ahead on to the next one. If you have something, just type it. It's just that it really is lagging a lot from my end, so I'll go back if you type in a question after this. Okay, so number 3 Okay, so number 3, we're talking about the digestive system here. There we go. Okay, so it's saying the location of 4 glands of the digestive system are labeled on the diagram below. The functions of these glands are also listed. So we have numbers next to the next to our glands, and it's giving us descriptions, and we just have to match them up. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and make sure that we know what these different parts are. So number 1 is pointing to your salivary glands, which is coming into your mouth. So I'll just write salivary glands. So these are not part of your digestive tract, you're part of your digestive glands. Okay, number 2 is pointing at our liver. Number 3 is pointing at this, it's pointing at the gastric glands, which really the arrow is pointing at our stomach. They didn't make it clear that they're not pointing at the stomach, but because they've said, this is a bit ridiculous actually, this question. Okay, whatever. Okay, so in the number 3 is pointing at gastric glands, which is inside our stomach, and number 4 is pointing at our small intestine, which has like intestinal glands going in there. So like you have intestinal juices. I find now that I'm looking at it, the question is framed a little bit ridiculous because within our small intestine, it does break down pretty much like this. All we know that the most digestion is happening in the small intestine, but it's not necessarily all coming from the intestinal juices. So as you guys know, the bile from the liver and the pancreatic juices from your pancreas, all of those pour into your small intestine. So I think that this is a bit of an ambiguous wording, but we'll just go ahead and answer this. Okay, so number 1, salivary glands. So let's see what we can match up there. So A says secrete saliva that breaks down starch and complex carbohydrates. Okay, so secrete saliva, I'm pretty sure you guys are good for this one right away. So 1 is going with A. So your salivary glands are definitely going to be going with the description of saliva here. The next one says secretes digestive enzymes that break down proteins, carbohydrates, and fats. Okay, so I think that for that one, there could be some confusion of whether that's happening in your stomach or in your small intestine. But if you look at the other descriptions, if you look at D, D says secretes digestive enzymes that break down proteins. Okay, and when we were talking about the difference, when we were looking at these chemical reactions in your body, when we were studying this, we said that your stomach only starts to break down proteins. So it does, like you do have stuff coming down with your food bolus from your saliva, and that's already breaking down starch, but it's protein that's being digested in your stomach. So I'm just going to put, so that means that when we're looking at B, secretes digestive enzymes that break down proteins, carbohydrates, and fats, that's supposed to be your small intestine. So we're going to match that up with number 4. So 4 is B. Produces bile that assists in the breakdown of fats. Bile is for your liver, okay? And it breaks down fats. So we'll match up number 2, which was liver, with C. And the last one, like I said, your gastric glands inside your stomach. Gastric juices in your stomach are what's breaking down, starting to break down proteins specifically, even though we know that you continue to break down proteins in your small intestine. Okay, so I know that you couldn't see the whole thing at once, but the options are at the bottom for you to be able to circle. Hopefully you're following along with your own exam. So we said that the answer was supposed to be 1A, 2C, 3D, 4B. So if you check that out here, then your answer should have been A. Okay? Again, take a second, type in questions now if you have questions about this stuff for the digestive system. You are going to be able to have to label, you're going to have to be able to label the digestive system and understand the different chemical and physical processes that happen inside the digestive system. Okay, if you check on your checklist, there's really a lot about digestive system. It's heavy on that, and that's why we spent a lot of time on it at the beginning of the year. All right. Number 4, here we go. So number 4, we saw this question on our review package for the mid-year exam as well. So I'm just going to adjust this a little bit so that you guys can kind of see more of the question. But again, so it says the circulatory system, pictured in the diagram below, is responsible for transporting essential elements around the body. It consists of the heart and blood vessels, such as arteries and veins. Depending on their role, the structures of the circulatory system are categorized as part of the pulmonary or systemic circulation. Some examples are illustrated and listed below. So what you're supposed to do here is you're supposed to match these things up, like from where it's pointing at, you're supposed to match it up from these numbers with what the structure is and what type of circulation it is. Okay, so this diagram I find to be a little bit confusing because it was different than the one that we saw in our textbook. It was set up a little bit differently. Okay, but I just want to remind that pulmonary, well, close my pen, don't know when that happened. Okay, pulmonary is talking about your lungs, so it's for respiration. Systemic circulation is when it goes to your whole body. Okay, so that's when you're trying to get blood all over your body to be able to bring oxygen and nutrients to your cells and then get waste back to be able to take it out of your body. Okay, so that's important to remember that those are the two kinds of circulation. So as we know, we have two sides of our heart and that one is doing pulmonary circulation and one is doing systemic circulation. So let's just take a look here. From the beginning for number 1 is pointing right here to something that is going, and they have an arrow on here, if it's going away from our heart, okay? Most of the time, our arteries are full of red blood, but we said that there's a small occasion when it's going from the heart to the lungs that it could be blue, okay? But no matter what, in any case, arteries are always traveling away from the heart. So your heart is this thing in the middle here, and you have this arrow pointing away from the heart. So number 1 is an artery, okay? And then the type of circulation it's doing, well, here it's not really being super clear, but it's trying to show, like in the other case, these ones are going, these are supposed to be your lungs. So this case would be going to your lungs. This one is just traveling like away from the lungs and the heart. So that is supposed to be pointing at systemic. So systemic here was a 2i, so number 2. Okay, so number 2 here is pointing, this arrow where number 2 is going away from your lungs back towards your heart. So the one that's going back towards your heart, so for number 2, back towards your heart is always, always, always a vein. So 2c, and it's inside your lung, so that's supposed to be pulmonary. All right, and the third one is just pointing all the way into here. Okay, so the third one is pointing at your heart, which is B, your heart. And your heart is responsible for both pulmonary and systemic. So that would be that one. Okay, so then if you look at your options at the bottom, okay, the one that has a matching setup from what we were just talking about would be B. Okay, you are going to have to know quite a bit about the circulatory system, but not as much details as the digestive system. As you look on your checklist, there's really not a lot about the respiratory. There's a heavy focus on digestive. There's a little bit of circulatory and a little bit of reproductive system. For sure, you have to know the urinary system. Okay, so just focus on your checklist when you're going through this so you can make sure you know, like some of these exams, the practice exams that I'm giving you, they might not have the same focus as the exam we're doing because maybe the checklist they got that year was different than the checklist we got this year. Okay, so if there's a question that you're like, we really didn't put a lot of emphasis on this, I don't really understand this as much, it could be because their checklist was different from ours because we started, this one we're looking at right now is from 2013. All right, I'm going to move on to number 5 here, and then we'll just we'll stop after that. But you guys, like I said, just type in if you have any questions. I actually have no idea how many people are actually tuning into this right now, but whatever. At least there's people here, so that's awesome. Thanks for showing up. All right, number 5. Different muscle types can be found throughout the body. Below is a list of muscle types and parts of the human body. So you're just supposed to match these up. Like I told you guys, a lot of the questions on your exam is going to be matching things up with each other. That's really the only thing they can do for multiple choice questions, except for they might ask you to do a few calculations of like, we've been doing calculations of density. It's possible they could ask you to calculate a dilution. But other than that, I think it's going to be mostly matching up. Okay, so at first muscle type they're talking about here is smooth muscle. So they put, when we were talking about smooth muscle in class, we said smooth muscle is usually for like inside of tubes or some organs. Okay, so in this case, if we look at our options, right atrium, blood vessel, or bicep. Okay, so right atrium is inside your heart. Blood vessel is carrying, it's also in the circulatory system, but it is a tube that's carrying blood throughout your body. Okay, so that fits what we're talking about here. So we'll put blood vessel. Whoa. Okay, so that means one goes with, one is going to go with B. The second one, cardiac. Anytime we're talking about cardiac, that's supposed to be your heart. Okay, and right atrium is one of the 4 parts of your heart that we had talked about. Okay, so this is a piece of your heart. So cardiac is going to go with right atrium, so that's A. And last one, skeletal. Skeletal muscles are the ones that are for being able to move your body around. Okay, so being able to move your limbs. So movement of limbs. I guess you can't see that as well. Okay, movement of limbs. So we'll put that with a bicep. Okay, hopefully you guys all are familiar with what your bicep is. You do not need to know all of the skeletal muscles. I really think that if you're going to ask you, like we didn't put a heavy focus on your skeletal muscles and being able to name different ones. We definitely did go over a couple, like specific ones. Sorry, Brian's asking, what's the other one other than atrium? Okay, so we have right atrium, left atrium, and we have right ventricle, left ventricle. Okay, so those are the different pieces. You have atrium and ventricle on both sides. Okay, but yeah, for what I was saying about your skeletal muscles, you do not need to be able to know all of the skeletal muscles. There would be a focus on things like bicep or tricep, which you should kind of have an idea of what they are. I definitely mentioned gluteus maximus several times, but that was just because I thought it was funny that you guys had to say buttocks on the Jeopardy and stuff like that. But I don't think that they're going to be busting out questions of all kinds of skeletal muscles because you're not supposed to have memorized that, okay? So your bicep is a muscle in your arm between your elbow and your shoulder for you to be able to like curl up your muscle on top of your arm, okay? I'm pretty sure you guys all know what that is. All right, so skeletal is C. Okay, so that would mean that our answer here, if you match these up, would be B. All right, so I'm not going to go through any more because you guys have already been sitting here for almost half an hour on your weekend. So, and I know you have to get going on your car project. A lot of you have been emailing me questions. Continue to email me if you're not sure about anything. But like I said, I was telling you on Friday in class or for the rest of the week in class that because the car project was so open-ended, you can pretty much do whatever you want for the car project. Like as long as you're building it yourself. A lot of people have been asking me questions if they're allowed to bring some kind of track or something to lay down on the ground that they wanted to run their car on top of. I really don't care. You can do whatever you want for that. Okay? So no problem. Whatever you want. Like it's open season for the cars. Use whatever you can to build it. As long as you're able to travel 2 meters, you'll be good to go. Okay, so people are asking me now, can you take pictures of this and post them on the website, please? I think this stays on YouTube. Yeah, it does. You can watch it afterwards. So once I stop streaming, you can like still watch it as a video afterwards. So if anybody didn't get a chance to come in and watch this, or like came in midway through, like you can watch from the beginning afterwards. Okay, so I'm pretty confident that you'll still be able to watch it, but I have like two laptops open in front of me right now. I'm gonna check it out on the second laptop after to make sure you guys can still watch it. But yeah, I'm pretty sure it's gonna save. Is there anything else? Does anybody have any other questions before I stop streaming here? Nice. Thanks, Dennis. Is that it? Anything else? I really don't know how long this lag is. I feel like it's like a solid 30 seconds. Okay, well, I'm going to shut this down. Like I said, if anyone has any more questions about the exam, like we're not going to go over this in class. We don't have to go over this in class tomorrow because we're doing the car project. Please, please, please don't forget to bring your car because that is your final lab exam for the year. But other than that, just email me if you have any questions. All right? Have a good rest of the afternoon. Bye, guys.